Welcome to the Breathing Edge podcast.
Welcome.
Today's episode, we have the privilege of interviewing a very busy and amazing man named Ed Andrew. Now, Ed Andrew is a startup and business mentor and coach. He helps people grow themselves and therefore their businesses to multi-million dollar profits. He's built his companies to $1 million plus in profits from Sydney, Delhi, London, Bali, and he now advises tech-driven startups and scale-ups to create sustainable, investable, and scalable businesses. So
yeah, he was a one-time lawyer, but don't hold that against him either.
Knowledge is power. Ed's focus is on helping business owners design their career and life that best supports, this is my favorite, the human experience through transformational training and helping organizations to optimize human potential through his world-class skills and life training. So Ed's passion is truly the people, as you'll see in this podcast.
And some chocolate
as
well.
Chocolate, raw chocolate, and human behavior. So he helps to develop a positive mindset, and what I love is he's got another aspect to it around heart set. So you can use the both when you need them to thrive. And what keeps him busy these days is certainly giving advice and mentoring startup boards, founders, investors, both tech and non-tech businesses in the US, the UK, Australia, Asia,
all over the world.
since 2012 on how to build and grow and scale their businesses to 8 figures. Now, we're not really going to go too much into the how to build businesses in this podcast.
No.
We're going to talk about more the human. What's behind?
Yeah.
What's the energy behind the person? What's a human experience, and what needs to happen in the background to scale?
And also what there is to learn from the experiences you have in life. And we dig deep into this, and we were fortunate enough to be on Ed's podcast. And he's an amazing guy, and we thoroughly enjoy the conversations that we have with him, and we know that we're going to have many more to come.
Absolutely. So his podcast is the popular Human Impact, which is also known as the Ed Andrew podcast. And on that podcast, he interviews change makers and leaders from all around the world, yes, such as us, bringing the experience of humanity to both work and life, because after all, work is life and life sometimes is work. So I know you'll enjoy this podcast, and we reach a couple of touchy points that are sometimes quite difficult for people to talk about in the human experience, and well worth your time spent in listening to this one.
It's just, and they're young, they're in their early 30s. And that's when, I don't know how old your friend was, Angie, but I imagine they would have been quite young still, right?
Yeah, early 30s, early mid-30s, yeah.
Yeah, it's just horrific. But did she not want to do Western treatment, or didn't know the process, or?
Yeah, look, she resisted anything outside the medical system. In fact, she got quite angry at me for in offering to help in any sort of way. I think for me, it was easier for me to deal with that situation because I was able to just honor her choice.
Well, it's her choice and it's her life. And this is it. We get the choice what to take. But I think what people find very frustrating, and I certainly found this at the beginning, is lots of women coming out and saying, I wish you had shared your, I wish my husband, brother, uncle was around to hear you share your story. Because maybe they would be alive today.
Yeah.
And, that's simply the fact that, we have a choice where to go, and there are all sorts of different programs we can do. None is going to guarantee to save your life, right? Or to beat the illness you have, but you're giving yourself a shot at it. That's why we do it.
Yeah.
No doctor's going to say, I'm going to beat your cancer. They might say, I have a really good feeling about this, and I think it's going to work, but it's unlikely they're going to say that to the patient. They normally tell it to the patient's family. Because you can't say, I'm going to make you better, and then 6 months later they're saying, I'm sorry, it's over. It's a very fine line. I mean, cancer's rampant in my family, so it's very close. But I know that I remember the guy I did my meditation training with in the UK, not training, the retreat I went to in the UK, his father, I think, had liver cancer. And he talks in his book about being with him and basically using all of his energy healing, which is, he was, you know, a phenomenal healer, energy healer, and transformed his blood work from, you know, close to death to reasonably normal in the space of a night, doing deep work on his organs.
Mm.
And his father lived for, you know, another 6 or 12 months, however long it was, and then he passed away. And he reflects on, was that the right thing to do? Was it right to extend his life and then actually give him more suffering, or was it right just to let him go? So was I selfish in my own egotistical view of my ability to heal him, when actually, in other words, he's saying I interfered with nature?
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting concept that most people don't think about.
It's definitely a point, and you know, what we were able to observe of the people that we've seen is that lifestyle does play a big factor into this. There is, you know, there is that part of it, and when you know, when people are making the choices around their food, around their sleep, around their work environments, around even the toxicity of their attitudes and their behaviors and things like that, I think that they get tossed out. I think that people don't pay that enough attention to say that whether
I can
that
still taste those shapes, and they taste awful, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I can smell them on my hands as well. It's like, oh, shit.
It's like smoking, you know?
It is like smoking. It's like disgusting, but they tasted good.
All right, well, let's get on.
Okay, but yes, I think. Yeah. Anyway,
Your secret is safe. We'll cut this bit out.
I'll go and make some chocolate. But yeah, I mean, our choice is it's about knowledge though, and what you do with it, isn't it? And most people don't have access. They have access because the internet's in front of them, but it's a pretty scary space.
It is. Yeah, and that's one thing that I've come to realize. And I do not have the right to judge their decisions and choices because I have never been there before.
No, and all you can do is support. And if they don't want to take the support, so be it. That's it. Yeah. But that's not our place in life.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to see when someone's going through so much pain and suffering, and you have an idea that might help them, and they don't want to pursue it. That, you know, because you just think it's particularly if they've got children.
Yeah.
Because it's just a waste.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
And you know, I lost a friend, or the sister of my best friend, went on her when she was 40, and she was diagnosed with melanoma a month after her fourth child was born, and survived a year. But she was, you know, had a 97% mortality rate in that diagnosis. So she went on the juice diet. She probably extended her life 6 months to be with her children, but it was never going to. Well, I shouldn't say never, because people do experience spontaneous remission, but she certainly had quality of life with her, extended quality of life. And from all I've seen, and I'm not a clinician, is when people try and change really dramatically because they're given a terminal diagnosis. In my experience, the people who've been through that have maybe managed to extend quality of life for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think that falls into what you were saying before about, you know, you can change the surface stuff, you can change your choices, but if there's still stuff, you know, depending on how far along things are, but also your mindset around it is also a huge part.
I mean, there are healers out there who will say to you, you can reverse it at any stage, at any stage, because it's just energy. And if you channel the energy differently, you could just remove it. But you know, that's a big leap of faith to someone who never has experienced or thought about that. And there are people I've met who I would, if I was sick again, that I would go straight to and say, okay, right, let's get rid of this crap again.
Yeah. And also, as you said before, practiced. You know, this is unrelated, but it'll give you an idea of where I'm going. Is that we've had people come to us and say, "Oh, are you breatharians?" And they said, "Does that stuff exist?" And I said, "Well, there are people on the planet that have survived for extended periods without food. You know, they can do. There was a guy in India that did it, and he created.
I think there's a question mark over him, Shane.
Is there a question mark over him?
Oh, you would know.
Quite a big question mark over him.
Oh, okay. Well, but my point that
Only because it's modern day skepticism. It's like
right.
This 15-year-old kid walks into the jungle, comes out, a year later and hasn't drunk or eaten anything, and he's
That's not the guy. That's not the guy I was talking about. There was an older guy. He definitely drank water, but he had created something in the back of his throat that was feeding him this goo that was nutritious. It was a real horrid kind of thing. Have you seen this one? Have you heard about it?
I haven't heard that. The only one I know is the kid. But but there are reports of people in those caves in India. And I can't remember the district, but it's in the book this guy's talking about. And there are reports, and there are many people who believe this, right? That no one knows how old they are.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. They might have been in there for a century.
The point I made to friends of mine who were talking about this, I said, if you have had a family history of training for that, then if you grow up into that, then you're going to have certainly some skills developed in that area. If you've grown up, your ancestors have been conditioned, then you're going to have that. So it's the same with people that try and change things on a whim. If you come from a family that's just had really crap habits around food or around their whatever it is, it's led them to have. Well, it's hard for those people then to do a 180 degree flip and
that's the same with moving to vegetarianism or veganism. Is no one expects it, but I think the difference is, and I can talk about this, is that when I was given my diagnosis, that switch changed within 6 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
For me, no choice. Like, that's it.
And the interesting thing, we've had this on our podcast before, where we've spoken to people and that have had diseases and have come through it. We had a guy that had 20 different illnesses, cancer being one of them, healed himself, with different methods that we know of. His was getting more DHA in his body from seafood and being down the beach and being in the sunlight. And we've studied that extensively. And he did say to us, he goes, you guys, the interesting thing about you guys is that you're not going to have a lot of people that are going to have a lot of faith in when you're speaking about diseases. He goes, because you've never had any.
Well, yeah, and I think yes and no. I mean, my belief is, and this is what my podcast is all about, as you guys know, there are two limbs, right? If my podcast, Human Impact, one is those people who have had a catastrophic event in their life, whether it's abuse, whether it's illness, whether it's addiction, whatever it is, that's changed the way they think about life. They've had to confront it, and then they want to educate other people and help other people. And the other side is those people like yourselves, like Dan and Mikra from Apeiron, who haven't experienced that trauma in their life, but they are passionately bought into the fact that there are methods that can help other people with their lives. So there's no either-or camp. And some people fall into both camps.
Yeah.
I don't think it's true that you have to, be at death's door to help someone. That's bullshit. I see what they say about that, but I think that's absolute crap. Particularly when you're taking in the Western world that we live in, a Western approach to it. I think if you're just taking a holistic alternative approach to it and you've never experienced it, I think that's harder to buy, because it's very hard to tell people about experience if you haven't actually had that experience.
Yeah.
But you don't have to, be confronted by death to have trauma can be anything. It doesn't have to be, it's as severe as is the person who suffers it.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you ready to go?
I am.
we're
I'm just
already
looking at me thinking, we've been talking for half an hour.
It's us as well. Every time we get on here, we all get stuck into these conversations.
And if we didn't have a time constraint, I would be like, let's.
Okay, because I've got a sick daughter upstairs that my wife's with, but she's trying to do some work, so we probably should.
Yeah, okay, we'll get a crack.
We should get into it. You can just take all of that anyway.
We've been recording, so we'll grab a snack.
I can see my little red dot in the corner.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll start after our sigh. Okay. Okay, so I am really privileged to be here today, sitting in front of Ed Andrew on our podcast. And the reason why I feel so honored to be sitting here with him is because, well, one, his podcast, he's got the Human Impact podcast, and also his purpose and what he does in life all around the human consultancy. And I would like to get into that, but in a moment, I would like for you to just share with our listeners just a little bit about, just a quick snippet about your background, where you've come from that's gotten to where you are today.
And also, Ed, everyone will know that we were talking before the show. Like, we almost ran out of time to do the show. So we were talking before the show. But I want to circle around to what we were talking about, because I think it is, it's a hugely it's a huge topic that people do, talking about disease and death and things like that. And I don't think people talk about it enough. I think that, like, people are so fearful of it that they don't even want to bring it up. And so I want to circle back around to what we were talking about before with that.
Okay. First of all, thank you guys for having me on the show. I've also had you on my show yet to be released. And I love doing these multiple conversations. I think it adds a really very interesting dynamic. And I love the work that you do. So, where do we start with that question? Very briefly, in a nutshell, the professional side of life. I'm English, but I've lived in Australia on and off for the last 20 years. I was a barrister, which is, a lawyer for those in the States. Then became a headhunter, came to England, came to Australia with a new business I set up day after 9/11. So that's one of the first catastrophic events in my lifetime. Knowing one person in Australia, and built over the course of 9 years a very, very successful business, which I sold. Then went into a technology business, which was not so great. And then did a lot of consulting in startup world, particularly high growth tech companies. Launched a fashion business with my wife, which was amazing. Probably one of the most fun things I've had aside from podcasting. And lived here, lived in Bali, lived in the UK. We've been around and about. But now what I do is help people who are in a transition in their life. That's work and career, and a deeper place in that. And where I got to with that is that I've always been interested in exploring the sort of mystical other world that is out there. And being English and having had a very privileged and lucky and traditional background of going to one of the best schools in the world, and all the nonsense that goes with that, my eyes were definitely not open to anything which happened in the East. Right? It was very much closed, traditional, hierarchy, Northern European culture. But my family, it wasn't as if we'd lived any other life. It was just that that's what people learned, right, and what they knew. But I always thought, I wouldn't say I thought it was different. I always had an interest that there was something more meaningful in life. And I started doing things which are quite funny nowadays when I think about it, like taking Tai Chi classes when I was in my late 20s. I don't know why, honestly. It's just that I heard other people doing it, and we're talking 20 years ago, and I think Tai Chi was probably started by Helen Daniels on Neighbours. For those Australian guests. But she probably brought it to our attention. It's a bit embarrassing to say that. But the reality was that there was something else out there. So I explored that, and I sort of got quite a good feeling from that. Came to Australia, did more of that here, but it was also doing other, more intensive sport. But I remember, and this was a long time ago, but doing a Tai Chi class with this a Chinese master in Sydney, and he was very strict, and we were doing a meditation, but open-eyed meditation on the stomach, just to draw breath in and draw energy and heat in to the solar plexus. And, I definitely wasn't skeptical, but this was the early stage of my journey. So there am I standing there, with on one foot, with my hands doing something weird, focusing on my breath. And I never really had that experience. I like the flow of Tai Chi, and I like the energy, and I just enjoyed it. But I had this really warm feeling in my solar plexus, and that was the first feeling I'd ever had that there was something else out there that was actually really pure and enjoyable. I had absolutely no idea what it was, right? But I knew there was something there. So I carried on exploring that, and I used to travel a lot with work. I used to spend 3 to 4 months on a plane traveling around the world, literally from one country to another. And I had a business in India. And there were all sorts of little experiences in life that led me to this deeper and deeper and deeper knowledge and quest for what else is out there. And one of them, at the sort of early stages, was I remember being in Delhi in the hotel I used to stay in, and I said to them, I need a massage because my body's stuffed. I've got a very heavy chest infection. I've just got off a plane. I've got 2 days meetings. I've got to go to Moscow after that. So I knew I was in trouble. And I used to have a massage every week on a Friday afternoon, deep tissue, and it never did any good, but it was really enjoyable. And so they sent me this guy, and this guy turned out to be a healer. And I understood the concept. My grandfather was a neurologist, so I understand medicine, and I was interested in the other side of it. And he was explaining to me that his grandfather was a true Indian healer, shaman, that would heal by one touch. And he explained, I said, how does it work? And he said, well, I take your energy into my body and I cough and let it out. And I was really curious about this. And I bought it, I believed in it. It's not something I just think that's crazy. It's something I actually believed in. My belief is that if you believe in something, it's going to happen. And that night I sweated profusely, but the next morning I had no sign of any illness whatsoever. And that was really a profound experience. So most people might write that off. It's like, no, I'm not going to write that because I know something happened. I know something happened. And so I would explore it more and more and more and more and more. But it wasn't until, as you know, that I was diagnosed with cancer, prostate cancer, 7 years ago, on my daughter's 3rd birthday. And I was 42, and it wasn't aggressive. It wasn't going to kill me in the sense that it wasn't, it was a very small tumor. But I'm not someone who wants any form of malignant cell in my body, because as we all know, if that decides to go somewhere else, then you're in far more serious danger than otherwise. So that was sort of a long-winded way of saying where I got to. And then that opened the door to this amazing experience and journey that I've been on for the last 7 years.
Wow, that's profound. For me, just listening to your journey coming from the Western culture to an Eastern culture, and in our conversation that we were just talking about before, we're talking about the amalgamation of the two and how they actually don't have to be one or the other. You could work together with both sort of spectrums. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I was brought up in England, and I was around the medical profession. My mother had her sort of boyfriend long term after my parents' divorce for a good 10 or 12 years. Was a very, very eminent psychiatrist in London, in Harley Street. But he treated all the major rock stars who had addictions and severe addictions, some who took their own lives and some who survived. So we was immersed in this world of Western medicine. And I remember, he used to talk about his experiences, and some of them were, they're really profound and have a huge effect on him. But it was in the day when, my grandfather, who's a professor in neurology, had his own hospital. He would have thought all of this stuff we're talking about is absolute, total and utter nonsense. There's no merit for it whatsoever. And it would be very hard to have a conversation with him about that, because he was schooled in the sense of science, empirical evidence, that's it. It's really only now that, and I'm not an expert in this, I'm just someone who's experienced, who has gone to seek it and experienced it, is that the Eastern practices are now being measured by Western science, because they can now actually stick a scanner on it, or they can actually measure chakra fields, or they can measure what is happening with the electromagnetic energy in your brain and your heart with heart math. They're actually seeing how our bodies respond physiologically, chemically, biologically. So they can say there is merit in this. But the reality is that plant-based medicine started with plant-based medicine. It didn't start with scanners and chemicals and pharmaceutical companies, right? It starts with plants. And there's my daughter. She's come to get her dog.
That's all good.
She is used to podcast bombing. And so, in those days, in say the 80s, what the stuff we're talking about now, much of Western medicine, particularly in England, will consider it quackery. It's like, if you went to an alternative person, they were not certified, they weren't regulated, no one knew what they were doing, and frankly, it was all a load of nonsense. And I'm sure that theory still persists in some areas of the medical profession today, but I think it's changed enormously. And then you've got obviously people like Deepak Chopra, who is probably, to me anyway, the sort of father of integrative medicine. He himself says, as an Indian, I was completely cynical. I thought it was absolute nonsense until he bumped into one of his mentors, I think, at the airport and said, Deepak, just read this book. I said, I don't want to read this. Just read this book. And that opened his eyes to the whole world of integrative medicine. And, this is part of his culture. And he was still not interested in that, into Ayurvedic medicine. So I think, for me anyway, I was experiencing it, interested in it, but also living in Australia, as we're all in Australia at the moment. The thing is, our closest cousins are in Asia. They're not in North America. They're not in Europe, right? They're in India, or they're in China, or they're in Malaysia, or Indonesia, or in Tokyo. So we get this sort of melting pot of different medical practices. You've got, Ayurvedic medicine, you've got Chinese energy medicine, then you've got, all the different cultures and their beliefs, Buddhism and Taoism and shamanism around the world. So I think we're much more exposed to those practices. You could, in Sydney, walk down to Chinatown, you could walk into probably 40 different Chinese herbal practices. Some will be brilliant and some not so, but they're there, and some of them barely speak English. And I just don't think that in maybe North America or Northern Europe, there is so many people seeking that type of help, or that it's actively promoted or received. If you went into a corporate and asked them, of 1,000 people, how many people have been to see a Chinese energy healer or had cupping or acupuncture in Australia, I would be surprised if it wasn't many times more than you'd find, say, Northern Europe or the US.
Yeah.
And so I think that type of nexus to that type of treatment enables our awareness to go and find it and seek it, because, our ability to find, to seek help is based on our curiosity and access to that help.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm curious for you to share, what are some of those methods that you used to heal yourself? Like when you got diagnosed, of course, it would have been a real sort of interesting feeling. And I'm saying interesting because I'd like for you to share, what was that feeling that you got, and what were those steps that you took, and what were those belief changes that you went through to heal yourself?
Well, I think, the honest answer to that is my wife is far more knowledgeable in this space than I am, and had been in this space for a long time. And she introduced me to the healers here that she used. And she said, I've known this is coming. I can see it. I can not quite smell it. There are doctors who are out there who can smell it. These are Western clinicians. They walk in, they say, I know this is death or not death. It's very clear. I'll tell you a different story about that. It's not really a feeling. I mean, look, when you're told you have cancer, there's a feeling of, right. And my specialist said to me, he said, look, we did 25 core samples, and we found it 1. It's very small, it's 0.75 of a millimeter. He said, it's really a fluke finding, but we found it, and so you have cancer. It's like, great. And he said, the fact that we found 1 tells me that we've probably got 3 or 4 others in there as well. So he said, come and see me tomorrow, and then we'll work out what to do. So, the immediate fellow, this was my daughter, the eve of my daughter's birthday, was, okay, well, I'm going to feel pretty crappy for a little bit. So I went to bed. And the next morning, I went to bed, not feeling particularly great about life. And the next morning, I thought, right, that's it. Got to change this dynamic immediately. So I booked in to see him. I called a guy called Dr. Robert Feldman in Sydney, who is an osteopath, cranial osteopath. And he diagnosed my daughter's reflux, but he's not he's an osteopath. He's a medical professional. He's not a doctor. And he was brilliant. And I said, Robert, what do I do? I said, can you introduce me to someone? I said, this is what I've just been diagnosed with. I need to fix it. Western medicine is not going to help me because it's such a small tumor. The options are cut it out. And the medical treatment in Australia is no one will touch you to do that because at 42, I'm 100% healthy. It's a complete fluke finding. They were looking for it on the biopsy only because my PSA was raised. My PSA was raised simply because I had a disease called prostatitis, which is reasonably rare when it occurs, but I probably had it for 4 or 5 years. And that influences enormously the PSA reading. So the PSA was elevated because of an infection. It wasn't elevated because of cancer, because my PSA goes up and down, which it doesn't do if you have serious cancer. It just goes one way up. So mine constantly fluctuates. It still fluctuates. But that's a totally different story. So, and he said, what am I going to do? He said, I'm not going to do anything. He said, no one else is going to do anything. We'll put you on watch and wait. We'll give you an MRI every year. We'll biopsy you every 2 years. So if you stick to my program, he said, you will probably die of 85 of old age and nothing will ever happen to you, which is great. So you walk away. But the thing is, right, and people might listen to this and think, well, frankly, who cares? But the reality is, when you are a man, I don't care who you are, and you've been told you have prostate cancer, right? What does that mean? It means the worst case scenario, if they remove it, you'll never have sex again. That's the end of that journey, right? And you're still young, and it could kill you because if it's aggressive and it mutates, it has the potential to kill you. No one likes the word cancer. My brother had cancer at 24. He survived it. My father had cancer at 55. He didn't survive. My family has breast cancer within it. So it's a horrible disease. And that word changes your life because one, changes your ability to have life insurance if you want to buy a house, right? Insurers do not like people who have had cancer. You can be black marked for a very long time. Some people worry their ability to get a job because if you have a medical, you have to disclose you've had cancer. Are they going to give you a job or not? So it changes the dynamic of your life. And it's a horrible word to have hanging over your head. It's just not nice, right? So Robert said, go and see this guy. And he was a Harvard GP, Australian, who had spent 10 years in an ashram. His name is Swami Shankadev Saraswati. This is his full Indian name, but he's Western Australian. And he specializes in people who deal with traumatic loss. Generally, he's a psychologist, but generally lots of wealthy billionaires who've lost all their money and schmucks like me. I said, right, I'm going to go and see him. And then, my Western, the oncologist or the urologist said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and see it. I'm going to do Ayurvedic medicine. I'm going to see shamans. I'm going to do Chinese energy healing. I'm going to change my diet and do everything. And he said, if I was in your shoes, I would do absolutely the same, without a shadow of a doubt. I would explore every avenue to get rid of this. So I went and saw Shankadev. I also went to see a guy called Steve Lee, who's no longer with us, who's a Chinese energy practitioner, a brilliant guy. He's a master of his art. I went to see, the first nutritionist I went to see said, hard luck, every prostate cancer sufferer I know is never going to have sex again, so you're stuffed. It's like, right. And this is a very, very, very well-known nutritionist in Sydney. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it was a very unpleasant experience to be sitting in her practice. And she had no idea what she was talking about. Absolute nonsense. I mean, but this is a holistic specialist who is telling you Western medical rubbish, right? Which is completely out of order. Then went to see another nutritionist. She said, look, and the thing is, most nutritionists are women, right? And they don't have experience with men's health because it's not a practice that they pursue for many reasons. So very hard for them to know what good diet is for, because for those who are listening who maybe have family members who have cancer or have suffered it or are going through it at the moment, there are three types of diet for illness. One is pre-illness, which is don't get the illness in the first place. Or second one is whilst you have the illness and are preparing for treatment. The third one is post-illness in the recovery stage to get your strength back. So there are three different, effectively phases of your diet and nutrition. So very few people I discovered actually knew anything about men's health, but they knew the basic mechanics. So then I went to find a biochemist who did my blood work and told me I was deficient in X, Y, and Z. So in a short story, the Chinese energy guy, Steve Lee, helped me reduce, and we did a lot of acupuncture, their belief is that prostate cancer is not a physical ailment, it's a mental ailment. It's a blockage in the chakra systems between your head and your genitals. Once you release the energy, it flows again and everything's restored. If you wish it to be. But you've got to believe that it's going to happen. So I went to see him to remove all the negative energy I'd created in my head, right? And then give you techniques to put back positive energy and clear the system and clear your patterns back into your body. He also taught me to breathe in his way. Shankadev taught me to breathe, but the Chinese method is very much unsaid. It's all felt. The Ayurvedic practice was more philosophy around what is happening to you, intellectualizing it and then releasing it. And then I've seen shamans, and the nutrition was, basically raw vegan diet overnight. And we talked about this. How quickly can you transition? The reason I took that step is because all the research I did is that traditional Japanese diet and Southern Mediterranean diet are considered to be the best, the cleanest. And if you're going through prostate cancer, there are certain things you need, certain proteins, certain enzymes you need. And raw vegan diet really gives you the best opportunity. Red meat is not good. You have to, those days we were reducing testosterone. Now they're building it up again. So, the thing for people listening is these things change, but you've got to do your research. And sites like Livestrong, Lance Armstrong's site, whether you like him or not for what he did, doesn't matter. That website is an absolute goldmine of knowledge information for people who want to start learning, about nutrition and what type of diet they should have for the type of illness they have, or the type of chronic or illness, or if it's an autoimmune illness. It's just an amazing resource for people. And I'm incredibly grateful to Lance for creating that, because otherwise we wouldn't. It unpacks the information. Otherwise, you're having to read scientific journals, which I was a lawyer, so I'm quite happy to read them. But for most people, they're well beyond their level of knowledge, particularly when you're incredibly stressed, when you know that you have a chronic condition.
Now, I'm curious. That brought up another question for me that I have for you around what did you do to keep focused on your healing? So as energy, where your focus goes, energy flows, and when you're faced with something like that fears are quite easily probably rotate in, being strong and not being strong and these sorts of things. So what was it for you that had you stay the course?
I think it makes a big difference if you're a parent. I'm not saying if you're not a parent, it's not going to make a difference. But I think when you could see your two small children and there were 3 and 1 running around, it's like, well, I don't have a choice. But there is just simply no choice. And the thing which keeps you online is them. But then I used to do a lot of visualizations, which is imagining the cells breaking down and exploding and leaving your body. And I don't know why I started. That's just something I was doing naturally. It's just like, okay, I can imagine them leaving and disappearing and clean energy flowing into your body. And so I did a lot of work, Steve. He gave me a lot of exercises to do as well. And frankly, that process took, I think my next biopsy was 2 years later. And in that, it was in 2014. And that biopsy, they couldn't find any cells And their MRIs, my MRIs have always been clear. They've never found anything on the MRIs because the tumor is so small. But there are other tests they can do to tell you your prostate's enlarged, maybe due to infection. So technically, once they can no longer see it in your body and your PSA is restored to normal, you are in remission. Okay. And so at that stage, we had been living in Bali, and we went there for a year and a half, for my health, but also because we had a new business and to give the children a different lifestyle. And I met some amazing healers there. And in fact, this is why I personally am a big advocate of the alternative practices, or the sort of, Eastern practices, or traditional practices, I want to call them, as opposed to conventional medicine, traditional practices. Is I went to do, but I believe this. Okay, if you don't believe it, it's hard to comprehend it.
Great point.
Right. So I was I was asked who on the island was a really good healer, and I went to see this shaman called Chognagari up in Ubud. And my wife and I were into this, so we'd done lots of water temple cleansings and had amazing experiences from that. And the shaman said to me, he said, again, you don't have a physical ailment, you have a mental ailment. And he laughed. So I sat down in front of him in his clinic, which is in his house. It's open air, and he puts his hand on my head and says, why are you here? I said, I got cancer. He said, no, you don't. I said, I've got cancer. He said, no, you don't. You don't have cancer. He said, you have a problem in your head. He said, we're going to give you some leaves and do some treatment and it'll go. But again, this is the Eastern philosophy, is that this form of cancer in man is not a physical problem, it's a mental problem. And I think once I knew that, and I haven't really reflected on that, but since you're asking me, I think once I knew that, okay, if it's a mental problem that I've created, I can damn well get rid of it as well.
Yeah.
And because I had experienced this sort of amazing energy flow and warmth in Delhi, and also in doing the Chai Chi, I sort of figured, okay, there's got to be something in there. But in this Reiki session up in Ubud, there's a lady called Nikki Kasapian, who's amazing. And if you ever get a chance to work with her wherever you are in the world, I suggest you reach out. She's absolutely amazing. She's a Reiki healer, which is really I should caveat this for Nikki, but I'd say she's a white witch in the sense that she's incredibly powerful. And she heals without touch. She's basically just a conduit. For those who are listening don't understand Reiki, and I'm not a Reiki practitioner or Reiki master, but it's the way that universal energy is channeled through your body to remove blockages, as far as I understand. You guys will know Reiki more than I do. But I had this very profound experience, and I was levitating off the bed, or at least the feeling of levitation. You're 6 feet in the air, and it's like someone has literally put a tsunami through your body of it's this rippling, incredibly intense rippling energy that moves through your body for me. And so you feel your back arching, and then your hips and your legs, and it's literally someone has put a fire hose, on the top of your head and turn it on full blast, and it's removing all the crap that you have in your body. But it was so intense, this clawing at my face was so intense, I nearly said stop because I can't handle this anymore, but I didn't. And then I figured what was going on, and so I channeled the energy into the space in my body where I knew the blockage was and where I was told the blockage was, and just allow the energy just to laser focus on that space. And eventually I felt it just dissipate and move out of my body. And at that stage I knew that the energy blockage was gone. But don't forget, the MRIs were already clear, right? But clearly it was still in there because the energy block was still there. I might have removed all of the negative energy, but the blockage was still there. So that was a really profound moment. And then, a year later maybe, I did a silent meditation retreat in Wales in the UK, and that's Vipassana. And, you're doing body parts meditation. For those who are not familiar with that, so you're focusing on areas of your body where there's tension or blockages, and you're just working out what's going on there. And then if you're on your leg or your arm or your liver or your kidney or your gallbladder or wherever it happens to be, if you feel it, whatever you're feeling is a question of, okay, well, what does that relate to? And then try and release that, or at least sit with equanimity so it doesn't bug you. Anyway, so I was doing a very intense meditation on my prostate. And afterwards, I came out of the session. I've probably been doing it all day. So, 10 hours on and off. And I came out of the session and I went upstairs. I went to the bathroom and I bled. It's like, okay, well, for any man out there, I'm sorry to say this, and woman as well, I would imagine, if you bleed from that part of your body, you generally go straight to the doctor because it's generally telling you if your kidneys or your liver or something, so you've got a urinary tract infection. It's not pleasant. But there was no pain. I had no fever. My body was absolutely performing at its optimum, and I knew that there was nothing wrong with me. So I said to my meditation, I'm on a silent treatment, you can talk to your teachers. So this just happened. What do you think? And I said, I feel fine. There's nothing in my body that's telling me. And when you're doing that really deep work, your body's telling you what's going on. It's really intense. And he said, I suspect that's the tumor breaking down and leaving. But he said, go and get it checked when you get home. But he said, if you feel okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But he said, we've seen instances of tumors the size of grapefruits break down and leave people's body during Vipassana or during one of his healing retreats. And I went to get a checkup. I got another scan. I had all sorts of other scans in the UK. And I go and see my UK urologist. And he said, well, you're in remission, aren't you? It's like, yeah, but you haven't done anything. He said, well, in his world, he laughed at me and smiled. And he was Indian himself. And he said, well, maybe we just got it all when we did the first biopsy. And it's like, you know what? He could be right. I can't prove to you that the experience I had was the cancer leaving my body. But what I can tell you is it was real, it was factual, and it was physical. And to me, I don't need any more evidence than that.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like just in listening to your journey and your commitment to your health, that there's a certain level of devotion that is there that probably most people don't take the time to create or experience.
Well, I can tell you, now I think I can be really honest about that, Angie, is that it requires money, right? A Vipassana retreat in Wales is not expensive because it's all done for dana, so it's basically a donation. But I basically said on the day I was diagnosed, I fired all of my clients. I said, that's the rest of it. I don't want any stress in my life. And though I worked, I didn't really, I was a guy who's used to doing 17-hour days, 7 days a week, getting on a plane, traveling 10,000 miles for the day and coming back again, which is not good for you, by the way, for those listening. That is not a glamorous, sexy life. That is a crap life for your body. However exciting you might think it is not a good life. However much money you make, so whatever you're doing and you think it's cool, it's not cool. And I can tell you all the people on my podcast who've done the same have all ended up pretty sick as a result of that. So that's not a cool thing to do.
Really great point.
Where were we? Sorry, I completely forgot. Lost my train.
Devotional.
So yes. So let's be honest about this, okay? There is a cost involved in being that devoted to it. Okay, there's a cost physically, mentally, and financially. Fortunately, in Australia, once you go over a certain threshold of treatment, it's free, which it was amazing. I think it was once you spent $2,000, Medicare provided everything over and above that free, which was phenomenal. I was lucky enough also to go through the program in the UK and the NHS, which is widely derided. But they'd said to me, I said, should I go and see you privately or should I just go through the program? They said, look, you have a chronic condition. Once we've got you, you'll get the best treatment in the world. The trouble is, if you don't have a chronic condition, it's not pleasant. Because there are lots of gaps. But if you are sick and we see you, cancer is a chronic condition, whatever, regardless of your level of it, we've got you and we will give you the best care on the planet. And it's absolutely true. But the devotion requires, I fired all my clients. I was a mess mentally, right? There's no two ways about that. It definitely screwed with my head. And then when you go into someone like me, who is probably quite susceptible positively and negatively, and I've always been told that energetically as well, because if you really buy into energy and universal energy, you are susceptible. Like, you've got to allow that energy in, right? Which means you're allowing everything else in with it. Okay, unless you have really, really good filters and are really highly trained, which I am not, right? I know how to receive it, but I'm not highly trained. I haven't spent years devoted to the world of energy practice, but I'm one of those people who enjoys it. And we're all human, so we all have that ability. I'm not special. Every single one of us on this planet has that ability to connect with universal energy, if you wish to. And as an animal, we're connected to it anyway. So it's a question of how sensitive you are to it. So I knew I was really sensitive to it. And, it had a cost to me emotionally, mentally, and financially, because I wasn't really in the mindset of doing anything particularly profound. Yes, we had other businesses, but don't forget, I'd come back to Australia having just created a tech business, which I'd lost $1 million in. So I was, that in those days, that was okay. When I say okay, it's not great, but it was a pill. It was a pill I could swallow. Unfortunately, I got this diagnosis 6 months later. And, I sort of switched off to trying to work hard, in the sense that my energy specialist has said to me, don't screw up. You're going to get one chance of this. You've beaten it. Don't go back there. And I think what that did is that sowed a seed in the back of my mind. I've done a lot of work on this in the last 12 months, on my own personal development, which is that sowed a seed in the back of my head, which is, if you go off and create another really successful business, you're going to get sick and die again. And that, I put that subconscious set, and that's not what he meant. What he meant is, and there's a different story behind that. And I'll tell you that story now, because it's very profound. Is I was sitting in his consulting space, 2 rooms next to each other in Chinatown in Sydney, and lying there having cupping on my back, and energy's changing. And I feel this really cold energy wash over my body. So for those who don't understand, energy, just feeling of, you're sitting in a fridge, basically. All your you get goosebumps, and you just feel blah. And I know what that is, right? Because I'd learned that can be death energy, right? So he walked back and I said, Steve, what's going on? And I said, yeah, this really cold rush of energy, and I don't want it because it's not mine. I know when it's leaving my body, but it's just something else. And he said, well, I'll tell you in a minute. And he goes away, and the person next door leaves, and he comes back and he does his thing. And he says, person next door came to me 15 years ago with cancer. We beat it. He's now back in there with cancer again, and this time I can't help him. He's dying, and he will die. He said, that's the energy you feel. And I said, well, I don't want that in my room. And he said, yeah. And he's, the message is very clear. Don't be like this person. So I think I'd sowed that seed subconsciously, which is success means death in this very irrational state. Or hard work means, sickness. And so I worked hard, but I wasn't getting any results from it. And, I can tell you, it definitely plays with your mind. And then when you go through this incredibly deep experiences, like I had in Wales and the Vipassana retreat, when this thing leaves your body through meditation. My wife was really worried about me going to meditation, because she thought, and she understands it, but she thought, you're going to come out of that. I'm really worried you're just not going to need us and the children anymore. You're just going to go and sit in the cave and dwell. And there's a truth to that. Okay, we can laugh, but there's a truth to that, because it puts you in a place where you are so heavily protected from the rest of the world. You feel no pain, right? Why would you want to expose yourself to social media and the white noise of life? So all of us, and I know you guys are in this space as well, we're on the treatment thinking, well, how do we apply to this to our real life? And for those who are seeking treatment in this space, whether it's holistic or not, everything that I've learned is that the people who teach you have to take you what is called going into the valley and out of the valley. So into the valley is where we do this really deep, intense, immersive work on ourselves. And this is not something you do for half an hour and walk out of, but you've got to be brought out of that valley as well, which means you've got to be brought back into a stage of grounding and reality. And if you're not doing that, that energy will sit in the same space. And it will really play havoc with you, because it's very hard to make decisions in that space, because the energy is just constantly, it's like a vortex which is constantly changing, but there's no stability from it. And it took me a while to reground really properly with a lot of work. to come out of a space where you can say, okay, now I can create again. Because it got to a stage I couldn't read a book for more than 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So meditation is meant to give you really incisive, laser-like focus. But when you're putting your body into stress and your amygdala shrinks and everything else happens, you can't focus. So I hadn't come out of it. I was staying in that space because it felt good, but nothing else worked.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the transition, that idea of transition, we've often talked about this in the work that we do, is that people have an experience and they experience lots of those things that you described, energy moving through the body, knowing where blocks are. And we have also then, expressed to them, you need to take this experience and you need to live into life with it. And you need to have a mode to transition yourself.
Mm.
And we talk a lot to people about, even as simple as transitioning from home to work mode, or from work to daddy mode, or, whatever it is. If
But
you
you've got
have
to be taught that as well, because I think one of the things is that these amazing teachers that we have access to in the world, they don't live. This guy does not live in the real world. He does not live in the world of being a householder, which is what they call us, with as a family, you need to, to support yourself and earn money. They don't do it. They do it for donation.
Yeah.
So they go back to their retreat and they continue to meditate and help millions of people around the world, but they do not live in our world. And realistically, they don't want you to live in that world either. Right? They want you to have no Wi-Fi, no electronics, no technology, because of the way that when they do the really deep work, it just interferes with our bodies.
Yes.
So, but we have to walk out, you imagine you walk out of a 7-day or 10 or 15-day silent meditation retreat. Some people go for a month. You haven't uttered a word. You're in this incredible space, and suddenly you've got to get in your car and deal with the guy shouting at you as you try to pull out of the driveway.
Yep.
Right? You just can't cope. You actually don't cope at all because you haven't had to do it. And imagine you spend 10 years in that state.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that this helped me beat the illness I had, but it also left me with a lot of baggage around your identity. And I think this is something that is a really important conversation to have, because we want to go to that place because it's a nice, safe space. But unless you actually want to become a meditation teacher and live on donation, right, you can't exist like that.
Mm.
Well, I was looking at your site and I loved, there was a video that I was watching on there, and there's something on there, I catch the essence of it. And it was talking about leaders and great leaders know when to use their thinking brain, and it essentially knows when to use the intuition and the heart.
Yep.
And the question I was going to ask you is, what if you were, I don't know if you would have 3, 1, 2, or 3 key habits or key things that you do that that support you in that transition.
Mm.
On a daily basis, on a daily practice basis.
Anything that you can share that's
Like, what are some of the key things for you?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think we go back to that. This is a practice which has taken a lifetime to develop.
Yes.
And I think everything that we learn today is that you know this because this is very much your world, and it's something I've been exposed to, not because I was seeking it, but it took something, an express train to sit me and hit the side of the head to actually wake up to the reality of it. Is that this is not, in the just-in-time economy that we live in, something that you just go and get a shot of something and you walk out better. That's just not how it operates. And I'm trying to be serious but my 8-year-old daughter is standing behind me looking at me. Hello, my baby. Can you give me a little bit more time, darling?
How much longer? We're going to go on a walk.
Okay, I'll take you on a walk before it rains. Up you go, and I'll be up. Okay? Promise. Sorry, I was saying, this is a lifetime's commitment. This is not something you can dive in and out of. So you can teach breath work, but ultimately you're changing the way that your body works.
Mm.
You can't just come to you. I'm sure maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's unlikely they're going to come to you and do one 30-minute session and say, "Oh, wow, I'm fixed."
Yeah. You're going to create a habit around what you want to support.
You've got to create a habit. So in answer In answer, or maybe you can do that. I shouldn't say that. They should all go and talk to Shane and because they will fix you in 30 minutes. It's $100,000, but they'll fix you in 30 minutes.
I like that.
It's worth every single dollar. I suggest you sell your house right now and go and see them. But seriously, you know, it's a lifetime's progress, and we are not perfect. I make catastrophic mistakes still, right? When you don't listen to what is going on, and you use and the whole point of that video is to say, particularly as men, we've been trained since post-industrial revolution that the only value to ourselves is our mind, because that's what pays us to do something. We no longer work with our hands anymore. Sorry, darling. Okay. Oh, it'll be fine. So, you know, we've been trained to use our brains, our minds, not our hands, because we don't dig the earth anymore. We don't garden and farm, or, you know, that's not where the majority of people, certainly in the Western world, are anyway. But we've forgotten that basically we're animals. I mean, I don't know who doesn't believe you are. You're still an animal. We walk on two legs, but we're still an animal. So we're sentient. We're connected to all these different amazing things that, you know, when an earthquake happens or a storm happens, all the birds go away. Why are we not tuned into that anymore? Seriously. This is part of our DNA. And so when we learn to be more intuitive and to feel for solutions, and the point of the video is to say is that, you know, the best leaders are really instinctive and intuitive. They know when those red flags are going off, and they really zone in, not just saying it's a red flag, so I don't know what that means, but I need to be careful. They know what it means. Is it something which is, you know, business critical? Is it life critical? Is it just something which is a fear which is raised up again, which I've got to deal with and overcome? Now, what's the basis of it? So it's these reflective practices. So I know, and I say, you know, we're not perfect, right? At all. I know when my body is, even this week, you know, early in the week, it was, you know, Monday, and I was vibrating, so I could feel my body, the energy just shaking, which is not stable. And everything I did that day just got thrown out of whack completely. It was like everything was changed. It's like, what on earth have I done to create this chaos today? I hadn't done my daily practice. If I'd done my daily practice, because I was up at 5:30 in the morning having to do a 3-hour drive, and it was raining or whatever, so I just do it as an excuse. I just didn't do it. If I'd done it, I would have known that I was vibrating, and I would have sat and spent more time to release it, understand what it is. Or in the car journey, I would have done a lot of work on it, but I didn't. I just ignored it. So again, I'm not perfect, but these type of practice, which is my daily practice, which is not long at all, it's just breath work and figuring out where I am. So when I wake up every morning, trying to affirm that I'm excited, it's going to be a great day, create the energy around that. If you're feeling flat and your energy is low, understand maybe why that is. So there's a 10-step process that I take people through, but also that I try and apply to myself, because I've done enough work to know when I'm in chaos or below 5 out of 10. And whoever you are, you're going to get moments like that. There is just we're human, right? That means we are imperfect, but we can be better at living at 6 out of 10 than 5 out of 10. So my daily practice is affirmations, mantras, breath work. I do some Qigong energy exercises as well. And I guarantee I'm better than that. But if I'm in a really not a good place mentally, for whatever reason, you just wake up and just, you know, it's just not a good day. I will then try and do some deeper meditation to really unpack what's going on. If I'm on a drive, I'll listen to a podcast that I know will help me out of that space, and I'll do the breath work. I'll try and come out of my head and more into my body and feel what's going wrong. What have I, so the event, thought, feeling, reaction, that process, what event has triggered me to feel like that? What thought that I'd had when I woke up that suddenly set me off into a space which I don't want to be in, and how do I pull myself out of that?
Wow.
So it is a process, and as I say, you know, it's an ongoing process. Anyone who teaches and tells you that, and I was talking to someone earlier about this, says that, you know, they are perfect and they're on a pedestal, I promise you they'll fall off that within a couple of hours, because life just is not as simple as you make it out to be.
Yeah.
It can be very simple, but in terms of our ability to recognize when we are, I say vibrating, but other people might say frustrated, disappointed, agitated, if you understand energy, you can, you feel it. You guys will know that your breath changes, right? Your heart rate changes. Everything in your whole physiology changes. And if you're connected to that at a deeper level, you can understand that. But the reason I say tap more into those feelings is because, it could be a business decision. It could simply be, I really don't want to go to this meeting today because, I know it's going to go badly. Why is it going to go badly? Because so-and-so happened, so-and-so. So you can unpack all that. But if you really go into your intuition, what we're saying is, why would I go to that knowing it's not going to go well? Why don't I just cancel it or reschedule that, create the positive energy around it and go and do something else? Why have you not listened to that intuition? Or if you're going on a date, I don't want to go on that date because it doesn't feel right. So why do it? Or you're going to get in the car and go and see your best friend today and you think, oh, something's off. I don't want to do that. So you call and say, look, let's do it tomorrow. And you find out there was an accident on the freeway. It's all of these things that your connection as an animal, right? And I go back to that, and people might think this is loony, but you've got to remind yourself that we are living, breathing. We do not have a computer inside us. Okay? We're organic material. So we're connected to all this amazing universe of feelings and thoughts, regardless of how you want to frame that. And if we forget how to do that, imagine this, right? Imagine you say you got $100 in your bank account and you've only ever got access to $5 of that. How would you feel?
Limited.
Limited. And this is what you're doing by not tapping into these other very core aspects of how we function as human beings.
I love that. There is a word that you used, we hear in society today a lot about mindset, but there's a word that you used around heart set.
Yes.
Being able to connect back into exactly what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah, and there are lots. So, like Robin Sharma is a heart-based leader. There are lots of Jay Shetty's a heart-based leader. This is what they sort of coined this phrase of heart set. But I think it's very important because mindset is our ability to think and visualize and affirm and create this energy around our thoughts. But how we feel is a natural process. So if we have 70,000 thoughts a day, how many feelings are we going to have? 70,000 feelings a day. Right? They're intimately associated with each other. But if you have decided to switch that off completely, how successful do you think you can be at just general decision making?
Well, not only switch it off, I think people get almost, with modern life, they get railroaded into it, or they feel they get railroaded into it as well, because our attention's getting grabbed. Our mind's getting grabbed so much, with use of technology and all the things that we do. So,
and I think that's absolutely right, Jane. I mean, I use social media, but I was saying to someone today, my most successful business, I had no social media profile whatsoever, none. Not one account. Yeah. And I know plenty of people who have immensely successful businesses who do not have any social media in their business or personally. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, because if you're going to run an e-commerce business or the business that we're in, you have to have social media. But there is such a white noise surrounding what you feel you must do because the rest of the world thinks because you are judging yourself or comparing yourself to what the rest of the world thinks. That's an innate part of our human DNA, particularly when you have this huge exposure to social media, because if you're not doing this, you're crap, or you're a failure, or da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's very hard, even for me and you, to live outside of that, because you still need it for your business. But the reality is to think, and again, this is a simple concept, hard to pull off. It's like, and when you get to the stage where you just want to travel or sit with your friends or family and enjoy life, ask yourself, do your best friends who really care about you give a damn about how much money you earn? Do they really care about what your job is?
No.
Mine laugh at me on a constant basis when I tell them the stories of what happens on a daily basis. They're just your friends.
Yeah.
The only people we worry about are our virtual friends who we don't know and engage. We engage within, on a tap of a keyboard. But they're not the people who support you in life. And says my daughter with her puppy, sniffing away.
I know.
Well,
we haven't finished yet.
We do know
5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay. Go on, says you time it. Okay.
I love it.
Great. Yeah.
So I think that's really important to the point that you were talking about being able to tap back into the human experience. And I love the work that you're doing around supporting leaders who want to impact their community. And it's like the most effective leaders do have that ability to be able to tap into that heart set, who can tap into their intuition and their heart as well as their brain. And it's brilliant.
But the thing is, the other thing I want to stress is that not everybody needs to go and do the work that I've done to fix whatever's going on in their life, right? Some people just are really good at already being tapped into their intuition and they just use it. But I bet you nowadays, a lot of them have some form of meditative practice, even if it's just sitting still for half an hour a day with no thoughts. Nowadays, we frame it as meditation or mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. But I bet you they have a practice where they say, I'm going to go and do some sport, or I'm going to simply just sit and have dinner with my husband, wife, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, or just be on your own. So they have some sort of reflective stillness practice, because if you don't, you can't tap into it. It doesn't surface for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, in closing, there's one last question that I have for you. And it's around, we get up every morning. But what juices you when you get up? What is it that has you get up and create the day that you want?
What gets you out of bed?
I think nowadays, very simply, is if I had a Post-it note stuck on my computer or my forehead, because probably my forehead's better because I look at myself on a computer all day long on these calls, right, and everything else, just thinking. So it's really two things, right? And one thing is really fundamental. Again, I have not been always good at this. I'm trying to be better at it, which is, has what I've done today advanced the cause of my wife and children? Not myself, just them. Because ultimately, however much money I make or whatever job I do, yes, I can be happy and I can find happiness. Like I love podcasting. I love making my raw chocolates. I love my veggie patch in the garden. But if I'm not giving them, my commitment is to give them the life they deserve. And by virtue of that, to give myself the life that I want. Mm. And if I've done that, then I can serve other people to the best of my ability. But if I haven't done that, and I get to the end of the day thinking, have I served my family first? And the answer is no, I'm not going to wake up feeling good.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing.
And thank you for your time, and thank your family for your time.
So I'm sorry, guys, because Isla's been podcasting here.
We've got little ones. Well, that's the human experience, isn't it?
That is the human.
And we should do this again, because we really enjoy speaking to you, Ed. We really appreciate your wisdom and being able to sort of sit here and draw that out of you. So and all this, everything that you've told us today, it's been.
And then it's been my pleasure. We've had many long conversations, but also it is, and I thank you for that, because you guys create the space for people to be able to really dive deep into their story. And the reason I like sharing this is because I know that there is no judgment. I know that we're just in a very intimate space, being able to talk. And I know that, I hope that your audience benefits that, and people might reach out to you or might understand that, this life we think is incredibly complicated doesn't have to be. And that even the people you put on pedestals, these figureheads, these social media celebrities, they're all just human, they're flesh and blood. They all have all the baggage that goes with them every day. We can transform our lives, and we do that. You don't have to have a catastrophic event to do it. It doesn't have to be traumatic. The idea is you do it before that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. But as we all know, this is not a quick fix. If you are prepared to do the hard work and to go through the pain and discomfort of that, it will get better. But the one thing I can promise is that the pain and discomfort that people are experiencing today through a lack of changing that is always going to be greater than the pain you have to go through to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it will be, it's not an easy, wow, it gets ugly and brutal at times when you have to confront yourself in the mirror. But when it works well.
Yes. Well, isn't that life?
That is.
Experience. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, and
Time's up.
we will let you go now.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
And, I really appreciate it. And I encourage everyone to listen to your show because you're doing such, brilliant work. And I'm a huge fan of yours.
Amazing. Thanks, Ed.
Ed.
And
You as
we'll
well.
make sure that we include links so that people can find you if they
Yes.
want to find you and seek you out. And
Yep. It's just thehumanconsultancy.com is the best place to find me. And the podcast is Human Impact.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye. Bye.